Hey everyone, I'm Peter Stories, here to guide you today. If you use this video to drift off to sleep, please tap like, hit subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now, settle in, get cozy, and let yourself relax. Hello, my name is Ezra Blackwood and I'm 29 years old. Before I begin, I want you to know that what I'm about to tell you completely changed the course of my life. 5 years ago, I was a forest ranger at Olympic National Park in Washington State. Today, I live in Arizona, work in an air-conditioned office, and can't even get near a forest without feeling my heart race. I found this channel through a friend who knew my story, or at least part of it. I've never told everything to anyone, not even my therapist. But you who follow real accounts deserve to know that there are things out there, things that people like me should protect you from. But sometimes we can't. Sorry if my voice shakes at some moments. This is the first time I'm telling this completely to someone outside of therapy. My wife thinks I should keep this to myself, but after 5 years of having nightmares, of waking up in the middle of the night hearing those sounds, I think it's time. What happened in the fall of 2019 was the reason I quit everything, moved to the Arizona desert, and could never be alone in a forest again. What started as a routine search and rescue procedure turned into the worst nightmare of my life. To this day, here in the dry heat of Arizona, I still wake up in the middle of the night hearing those voices calling my name between trees that no longer exist around me. The beginning of everything. I had been working at Olympic for 2 years when the Nia Thornfield case happened. 2 years might not seem like much, but I was good at what I did, or at least I thought I was. Olympic is different from anywhere in the world. Those temperate rainforests, the constant humidity, the mist that seems to have a life of its own. Completely different from this desert where I live now, where I can see for miles in any direction and nothing can hide from me. In Washington, especially in the fall, darkness comes at 5 in the afternoon and brings with it a feeling that the forest is watching you. Here in Arizona, even when it gets dark, there's still space. There's still air. There, the forest breathes into you. Nia Thornfield was a 24-year-old tourist from Portland who had come to spend a weekend hiking alone. She was experienced, had proper equipment, knew basic protocols. She wasn't the type of person who just disappears, but that's exactly what happened. The last time anyone saw her was Friday afternoon, October 18, 2019, on the Sol Duque Trail. She had registered her route at the ranger station and was supposed to return Sunday afternoon. When she didn't show up Monday morning, her sister in Portland called us. I volunteered to lead the search. Now, looking back, I realize it was my ego talking. I wanted to prove I could handle serious cases, that I wasn't just another rookie ranger. If I had known what was coming. The first signs. The search began Tuesday morning. Me plus 2 experienced rangers, Marcus Chen and Sarah Kellerman, and a search dog named Ranger. Ironic, I know. The plan was simple. Follow her registered trail, check the designated campsites, and expand the search in a circular pattern if necessary. The first few hours were normal. We found her footprints on the trail, some empty energy bar wrappers properly disposed of. Ranger picked up her scent easily. Everything indicated a normal hike up to the point where the trail forks near Lake Crescent. That's when things started getting strange. Her footprints just stopped. There were no signs of struggle, no tracks leaving the trail, no indication that she had left the main path. It was as if she had simply evaporated right there. "This doesn't make sense," Marcus muttered, kneeling near the last visible prints. He had 15 years of experience, had seen everything. People don't just vanish into thin air. Sarah was checking the trees around us, looking for signs of climbing or anything that could explain the disappearance of the tracks. "The ground is soft here. There should be prints going in whatever direction she chose." Ranger was acting strange too. He kept sniffing in circles, whining softly and looking up at the trees like he could see something we couldn't. In all my training, I'd never seen a search dog react like that. That's when I heard it for the first time. A low whisper, almost inaudible, coming from the direction of the dense forest to our left. It sounded like a female voice calling for help, but so distant that I wasn't sure if it was real or just the wind passing through the leaves. "Did you guys hear that?" I asked. Marcus and Sarah stopped what they were doing and stood silent for a few seconds. "Hear what?" Sarah asked. "I thought I heard someone calling." "Ezra," Marcus said, his voice carrying that tone of patience that experienced rangers use with rookies. "Forests make noises, especially in fall with all these dry leaves. Your ears are looking for things you want to find." But I knew it wasn't my imagination, and from the way Ranger kept looking in the same direction the sound came from, he had heard it too. We decided to expand the search beyond the trail. Sarah stayed on the main trail to mark our position, while Marcus and I entered the dense forest following the general direction Naya's tracks should have taken. The forest in Olympic is different from any other. The trees are ancient, some over 1,000 years old, and they create such a dense canopy that even during the day it feels like twilight. Moss covers everything, trunks, rocks, the ground itself, creating a thick carpet that muffles sounds and can hide anything. We walked for about an hour when we found the first real clue. Hanging on a low branch of a Douglas fir, about 7 feet high, was a blue hair ribbon. Marcus recognized it immediately. It was identical to the one Naya wore in the photo her sister had given us. "How did this get up here?" Marcus muttered, looking around. The branch was too high for someone to accidentally brush against it. But what really bothered me was the condition of the ribbon. It was clean, showing no signs of being exposed to weather. If Naya had disappeared 4 days ago, the ribbon should show signs of humidity. Maybe some leaves stuck to it. This one looked like it had been placed there recently. That's when my radio started making that noise. Static. But not just any static. It was rhythmic, almost like someone was trying to talk through it, but the words were being distorted. Marcus tried his, but it was working perfectly. Only mine was having problems. "Must be interference from the trees," he said, but I could see on his face that he was starting to get uncomfortable too. We took a photo of the ribbon as evidence and continued. Now Ranger seemed more focused, as if he had found a fresh trail, but his behavior continued to be strange. He stopped frequently, looked back as if something was following us, and his ears were constantly alert. After another half hour, we reached a small clearing. And that's when we saw it. In the center of the clearing, there were clear signs of camping. Ashes from a fire that were still warm, an area in the moss where a tent had been set up, even some food scraps scattered carelessly. But there was no tent, no equipment. It was as if someone had camped there the night before and then disappeared, taking everything except the evidence that they had been there. Marcus knelt near the fire and passed his hand over the ashes. Still warm. Less than 12 hours. "This doesn't make sense," I said. "If Naya was here last night, where is she now and where is her equipment?" That's when we heard the crying. A low, desperate crying coming from the forest around the clearing. But it wasn't from a specific place. It seemed to come from all directions at once, echoing between the trees in a way that made my stomach turn. And it wasn't the crying of an adult woman. It was the crying of a child. Ranger started whining loudly and refused to leave the clearing. Marcus and I looked at each other, and for the first time since we started the search, I saw real fear in his eyes. "Marcus," I said, my voice coming out lower than I intended. "There are no children registered as missing in this area." "I know," he replied, checking his radio. "Sarah, are you copying me?" Static. He tried again. "Sarah, please respond." More static. The crying stopped as suddenly as it had begun, leaving the forest in a silence that seemed unnatural. Not even the normal noise of birds or small animals, just total silence. And it was in that silence that we heard the footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps, coming from the direction of the main trail. But they weren't the footsteps of someone lost or looking for help. They were the footsteps of someone who knew exactly where they were going. "Sarah?" Marcus called out loud. The footsteps stopped. We waited for an answer, but it never came. Just that heavy, oppressive silence that made each beat of my heart seem too loud. Marcus made the decision. "Let's go back to the trail. Now." But when we tried to find our way back, we realized something impossible. The trail we had followed to get there had disappeared. Lost in the known. I know that forest. I spent 2 years walking every trail, memorizing landmarks, learning navigation patterns, but standing in that clearing, looking toward where I was absolutely certain we had come from, there was no trail at all. Just dense trees, moss, and a darkness that seemed deeper than it should be in the middle of the afternoon. "This is impossible," I muttered, checking my compass. The needle was spinning slowly, not settling on any specific direction. Marcus was having the same problem. "Mine's going crazy too." He tapped on the side of the instrument a few times, but the needle kept spinning aimlessly. We tried GPS. No signal. The radios continued emitting only static. And Ranger was sitting in the middle of the clearing, shaking and refusing to move in any direction. "Okay," Marcus said, clearly trying to stay calm. "Let's use basics. The sun was to our left when we entered the forest, so it should be to our right now to go back." But when we looked up, through the dense tree canopy, we couldn't see the sun. The sky was uniformly gray, with no indication of direction. That's when we heard the voice. "Ezra." My blood froze. It was a female voice, low and distant, calling my name. It came from the forest ahead of us, from the opposite direction of where we thought the trail was. "Ezra, I need help." Marcus looked at me with wide eyes. "Do you know that voice?" I shook my head. It wasn't a voice I recognized, but there was something familiar about it, something that made my stomach churn. "Ezra, please, I'm lost." "It could be her," I said. "It could be Naya. Or it could be anything else," Marcus replied, but I could see he was considering the possibility. The voice called again, more urgent this time. "Ezra, I'm hurt. I can't move. All my training told me to investigate. If there was any chance it was Naya, I had an obligation to help, but every instinct I had developed over the past 2 years was screaming at me to stay away from that voice. "Let's take a quick look," I said finally. "But we stay together and don't go too far from the clearing." Marcus nodded reluctantly. He tied a rope to the nearest tree and we started following it, keeping close to each other as we walked in the direction of the voice. The forest seemed to get denser with each step. The trees were so close together that we had to squeeze between them, and the moss was so thick that our feet sank with each step, producing a wet and unpleasant sound. "Ezra, I'm here. Help me." The voice was closer now, but we still couldn't see who was speaking. And there was something wrong with the voice. It echoed strangely, as if it came from several directions at once, or as if the person was speaking inside a tunnel. We walked a few more meters when Marcus stopped abruptly. "Ezra," he whispered, pointing to the ground ahead of us. There were footprints in the mud, fresh footprints, still with water beginning to accumulate in the depressions. But they weren't hiking boot prints like Naya should have been wearing. They were bare feet, and they were too big to be from a woman. "Ezra, I'm right here. Come find me." The voice now came from a completely different direction, as if whoever was speaking had moved in complete silence to a new location. Marcus pulled my arm. "Let's get out of here, now." But when we turned to follow the rope back, we discovered it had been cut. Not torn or broken by branches, cut clean, as if someone had used a very sharp knife, and it was bleeding. No, it wasn't blood. It was a red, viscous substance I had never seen before, dripping from the cut end of the rope as if it were alive. "What the hell?" Marcus started to say, but his voice was interrupted by the most terrifying sound I've ever heard in my life. Laughter. A low, guttural laugh, coming from somewhere very close. But it wasn't human laughter. It was the kind of laughter that shouldn't be possible for human vocal cords to produce, and it was coming from above us. We looked up at the trees and saw a figure crouched on a branch about 20 feet high. Because of the shadow and distance, we couldn't make out details, but the silhouette was definitely human, or at least mostly human. The figure tilted its head to one side, much more than any human neck should be able to, and said in the same female voice that had been calling us, "Hello, Ezra. I've been waiting for you." Marcus drew his service weapon, but his hands were shaking so much he could barely hold it properly. "Who are you?" he shouted. "What did you do with Nia Thornfield?" The figure in the tree laughed again, and this time the sound reverberated through the forest, like an echo that never seemed to end. "Nia is safe," the voice said, and now I could hear something terrible in it, a dubbing quality, as if several people were speaking the same words at the same time, slightly out of sync. "She's right here with me. Want to see her?" The figure moved, and for the first time we could see it was holding something that moved weakly and pitifully, something that moaned with a definitely human and female voice. "Nia!" I shouted without thinking, taking a step forward. "Ezra, don't!" Marcus grabbed me by the arm, but the figure in the tree had moved again. 1 second it was on the branch. The next it had disappeared completely. And then we heard Nia screaming. Not a scream of pain, but a scream of pure, primordial terror. The kind of scream you make when you realize something unthinkable is about to happen to you. The scream came from deeper in the forest, moving quickly, as if she was being dragged. Without thinking, I started running toward the sound. The chase. Running through that forest was like running through a nightmare. Low branches scratched my face. Roots seemed to move to make me trip, and the thick moss made every step treacherous. But I could hear Nia screaming somewhere ahead, and the sound was moving away quickly. Marcus was right behind me, breathing heavily. "Ezra, wait. This is a trap." But I couldn't stop. If there was any chance of saving Nia, I had to try. It was my responsibility as a ranger, as a human being. Nia's screams became more distant, then stopped abruptly. The forest returned to that unnatural silence that made me want to scream just to break the tension. We stopped on a small rise, panting and trying to listen for any sound that could guide us. That's when my radio crackled to life. "Ezra, can you hear me? Ezra, respond." It was Sarah. Her voice was distorted by static, but recognizable. I grabbed the radio with shaking hands. "Sarah? Sarah, I'm here. Where are you?" "Can't find you. Main trail for 3 hours. Where are you?" "We're lost," I said. "Our equipment is malfunctioning," and the static increased, then stopped completely. I tried calling again, but there was no response. Marcus was checking his equipment. "My radio's dead too now, and look at this." He showed me his flashlight. Even though he had changed the batteries that morning, it was emitting only a weak yellowish light. I checked mine. Same problem. "This isn't normal," I muttered. "Nothing about this situation is normal," Marcus replied. And for the first time since we started, he sounded really scared. That's when we noticed the trees. They weren't the same trees we had run past just minutes before. These were different, older, more twisted, with branches that curved at impossible angles. And the moss was growing in strange patterns, almost forming symbols on the sides of the trunks. "Marcus," I said slowly, "how long have you worked at Olympic?" 15 years. "Have you ever seen trees like these before?" He was quiet for a long moment, studying the strange formations around us. "No, and I know every section of this forest." A branch broke somewhere behind us. We turned, but there was nothing visible. Just those impossible trees and shadows that seemed to move independently of any light source. "We're being watched," Marcus whispered. I felt it too. That skin-crawling sensation of invisible eyes tracking our every movement. But no matter where we looked, we couldn't see anything. Another branch broke, this time closer, and then another, coming from a different direction. "We're surrounded," I realized. Marcus checked his weapon again. "How many bullets do you have?" 6 in the service revolver plus 18 in the spare magazine. "Might not be enough." "Enough for what? We don't even know what we're dealing with." That's when we heard Nia's voice again. But this time, she wasn't screaming. She was singing, a low, melancholy lullaby coming from somewhere very close. but the voice sounded wrong, like she was singing with her mouth full of water, or as if her vocal cords were damaged. Sleep, my baby. Sleep in peace. The trees will keep you. Sleep, my baby, don't be afraid. He's coming to play. That's not right, Marcus muttered. The words are wrong. The song stopped and we heard footsteps approaching. Slow, dragging steps, as if whoever was walking had difficulty moving. And then we saw her. Naya emerged from behind one of the twisted trees, stumbling toward us. Even in the dim light, we could see that something was terribly wrong with her. Her clothes were torn and dirty, her hair tangled with leaves and branches. But what really shocked us was her face. Her eyes were empty, not blind, empty, as if something had removed everything that made her a person and left only the outer shell. Ezra, she said, her voice monotone and without inflection. Did you come to play with me? Marcus pointed his weapon at her, but his hands were shaking. Naya? Naya Thornfield? She turned her head toward Marcus, but her eyes didn't focus on him. Marcus, she said in the same lifeless way. Do you want to play too? What happened to you? I asked, taking a cautious step toward her. Who did this? Naya smiled, but it was the most terrifying smile I've ever seen, a smile that didn't reach her empty eyes, a smile that seemed to have been painted on her face by someone who had never seen a real smile. He taught me new games, she said. Fun games. Want me to teach you? Who? Marcus asked, still pointing his weapon at her. Who taught you? Naya tilted her head to the side, exactly like the figure we had seen in the tree had done. He's coming, she said. He's always been here, since before the trees, since before the men, and now he wants to meet you. That's when we heard the footsteps. Not human footsteps, something bigger, heavier, moving through the forest with a confidence that suggested intimate knowledge of every root, every rock, every fallen tree. Run, Naya said, but her voice was still emotionless, as if she were commenting on the weather. He likes it when you run, makes everything more fun. The footsteps were closer now, accompanied by a sound I initially thought was wind passing through the trees. But then I realized it was breathing. Deep, labored breathing, as if whatever was approaching was much larger than it should be. Marcus grabbed me by the arm. Let's get out of here. We started running again, leaving Naya standing where she was, still smiling that terrible smile. But when I looked back a few seconds later, she had disappeared. And the footsteps were following us, the predator. We ran for what seemed like hours, but time had lost all meaning in that impossible forest. The trees constantly changed around us, the topography altered in ways that defied logic, and the sounds of our pursuit came sometimes from behind, sometimes from the sides, sometimes from above. Finally, exhausted and disoriented, we took shelter behind a massive fallen trunk. Marcus was breathing so heavily I feared that whoever was chasing us could hear us. This can't be real, he whispered between gasping breaths. None of this can be real. But I could smell the odor, a horrible smell of rotting flesh mixed with something that smelled like rusted metal. And it was getting stronger. My radio crackled again, but this time it wasn't Sarah. Ezra. It was a male voice, deep and guttural. Ezra. You can't hide forever. The voice wasn't coming from the radio. It was coming from the forest around us, but the radio was picking it up somehow, amplifying the words in distorted static. Who are you? I whispered into the radio. What do you want with us? A low laugh reverberated through the trees. I am what has always been here, Ezra. Before your people came with their machines and their rules. This has been my home for a very, very long time. Marcus was checking his weapon again, counting the remaining bullets. 6, not many against an enemy we couldn't even see properly. What did you do to Naya? I asked. Naya is learning, the voice replied, and now it seemed to come from several directions at once. Just like you will learn, just like everyone learns, eventually. That's when I realized something. The smell was stronger, but it wasn't coming from a specific direction. It was coming from below us. I looked down and saw that the trunk we were hiding behind wasn't a dead trunk. It was something that looked like a trunk, covered with moss and leaves to appear part of the landscape. But when I looked closer, I could see there were textures on the surface that shouldn't be there. Textures that looked like skin. "Marcus," I whispered, "we need to get out of here now." But when we tried to move, the trunk moved with us. It wasn't on the ground. It was on top of us, camouflaged so perfectly that we hadn't even noticed. And now that it was revealing itself, I could see it wasn't wood at all. It was something alive. Something big and viscous that had been watching us while we thought we were hidden. Marcus screamed and fired 3 quick shots at the thing above us. It made a horrible sound, part roar, part human scream, and quickly moved away, disappearing into the darkness between the trees. "What the hell was that?" Marcus shouted, still pointing his weapon where the thing had disappeared. But I wasn't looking where it had gone. I was looking where it had been. In the moss where the creature had rested, there were marks. Marks that looked like human body impressions. Several of them in different sizes, as if other people had been pressed against that thing or absorbed by it. And one of the impressions was exactly the size and shape of a young woman. "We need to move," I said, grabbing Marcus by the arm. "Now." But as we started to run, we heard something that made us both freeze. Laughter. Human laughter. Coming from multiple directions at once. But not just any laughter. The laughter of people in pain, people who had been broken and reassembled into something else. And one of those laughs, one of them sounded exactly like Naya. The hunt begins. We stumbled through the darkness, our useless flashlights casting weak pools of yellow light that seemed to be absorbed by the forest itself. Behind us, the laughter continued, sometimes close, sometimes distant, but always there. "This way," Marcus whispered, pointing toward what looked like a clearer path between the trees. But as we moved toward it, the path seemed to shift and change. What had looked like an opening between the trees now revealed itself to be a dead end, blocked by a wall of thorny undergrowth that hadn't been there seconds before. "The forest is changing," I said, stating the impossible truth that we both knew but didn't want to admit. Marcus tried his radio one more time. "Sarah, if you can hear this, we need immediate backup. GPS coordinates." He looked at his GPS unit and cursed. "Coordinates unknown. Equipment failure. Multiple equipment failures." The device in his hands was showing impossible readings. Coordinates that placed us simultaneously in 3 different states, elevation readings that suggested we were both underground and at mountain peak level. That's when we heard the voice again, but this time it wasn't coming from our radios. "Ezra." "Marcus." It was Naya's voice, but wrong. Distorted, like someone was playing a recording of her voice through broken speakers. "Come play with us." "It's so much fun, us," Marcus whispered. The laughter started again, and now we could distinguish individual voices within the chorus. A man's deep chuckle, a woman's high-pitched giggle, a child's innocent laugh. All of them wrong. All of them broken. "How many people?" I asked, but I wasn't sure if I was asking Marcus or the forest itself. The answer came from directly above us. "Enough," said a voice that was definitely not human, though it tried to sound like one. "Enough to keep me company, enough to learn the games, enough to understand what this place really is." We looked up and saw shapes moving in the canopy. Not just one shape, dozens of them, hanging from branches, crawling along the thick limbs with movements that were too fluid, too quick to be human. "Oh God," Marcus breathed. "They're all up there." And they were. People, or things that had once been people, moving through the trees like they belonged there. Some were clearly recent, their clothes still recognizable, their movements still somewhat human. Others had been there longer, much longer. One dropped down in front of us, landing with a wet thud on the moss-covered ground. It had once been a man. I could tell from the hiking boots and the remnants of a Park Service uniform. But its limbs were too long now, its joints bent in directions that human anatomy shouldn't allow. "New friends," it said in a voice like grinding gravel. "So exciting. We don't get many new friends anymore." Marcus raised his weapon, but his hands were shaking so badly I wasn't sure he could hit anything. "Stay back. I'm warning you." The thing that had been a man tilted its head, too far, like a bird studying an insect. "Oh, you have the loud toys, we remember those. They make interesting sounds." More shapes were dropping from the trees around us. A woman in a torn camping outfit, her neck elongated like a snake's. A young man whose arms had somehow split into multiple appendages, and others shaped so changed that I couldn't tell what they had originally been. But worst of all was the small figure that landed with impossible grace directly between us and any hope of escape. It had been a child once. Couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old when whatever happened to these people had happened to them. Now it moved with the confident predatory grace of something that had learned to hunt. "He's coming," the child thing said in a voice like autumn leaves rustling. "He's so excited to meet you. He's been watching you for so long." "Who?" I managed to ask. "Who's been watching us?" All of the shapes around us turned to look in the same direction, toward the deeper darkness between the ancient trees. And I could hear it now. Footsteps. But not the footsteps of anything that should exist. Each step was too heavy, lasting too long, and accompanied by sounds that made my teeth ache. The grinding of bone against bone. The wet slithering of things that should be dry. The whisper of wind through holes that shouldn't exist. "He was here before the trees were seeds," the child thing said. "Before the mountains were stone. Before your kind learned to walk upright and think they owned the world." The footsteps were getting closer, and with them came a presence that made every instinct I had scream at me to run, to hide, to find somewhere dark and small, and hope it couldn't find me. But there was nowhere to run. The transformed people had formed a complete circle around us, and beyond them, the trees themselves seemed to be moving, shifting to block any possible escape route. "He likes the clever ones," said the woman with the snake neck. "The ones who think they understand the rules. It's so much more interesting when they realize the rules don't apply here." Marcus was turning in a slow circle, trying to keep his weapon pointed at all the threats simultaneously. "What does he want?" The laughter started again, but this time it wasn't just coming from the circle of changed people around us. It was coming from the forest itself, from the trees, from the ground beneath our feet, from the air we were breathing. "He wants what he's always wanted," said a new voice, and this one I recognized. Naya stepped out from behind one of the twisted trees, but she was different now. Her movements were fluid and wrong, like she was floating just slightly above the ground. Her empty eyes reflected light that wasn't there. "He wants to show you the truth," she continued, "about what this place really is, about what you really are, about what you can become." "Naya," I said, trying to reach whatever might be left of the person she had been. "Naya, you don't have to do this. We can help you. We can get you out of here." She smiled, that terrible painted smile. "Oh, Ezra, sweet, naive Ezra. Don't you understand yet?" The footsteps stopped. The forest held its breath. And in that moment of perfect, terrifying silence, Naya's smile widened until it split her face in ways that shouldn't be possible. "There is no out here. The truth." The silence that followed Naya's words was the most complete absence of sound I have ever experienced. Not just quiet, the total negation of noise, as if sound itself had been erased from this place. I could feel my heartbeat, but I couldn't hear it. I could see Marcus's mouth moving, but no words came out. Then, like a dam breaking, all the sounds of the forest returned at once. But they were wrong. Bird calls that came from empty air, the whisper of wind through leaves on still branches, the distant echo of human voices speaking in languages that had never existed. And through it all, approaching with deliberate slowness, came the footsteps. "You're beginning to understand," said the voice that had been speaking through our radios. But now it came from everywhere and nowhere. "Good. Understanding is the first step." The circle of transformed people began to part, creating an opening that led deeper into the darkness between the trees. and from that darkness he emerged. I want to describe what I saw, but language fails. The thing that stepped into our circle was shaped like a man, but only in the way that a shadow is shaped like the object that casts it. It was tall, impossibly tall, and moved with the fluid grace of something that had never been bound by physical laws. Its face? Its face was every face I had ever seen, shifting and changing like water. One moment it looked like my father, the next like a stranger from a half-remembered dream. But the eyes remained constant, ancient, hungry, and absolutely alien. "Ezra Blackwood," it said, and hearing my name spoken by that thing made my soul recoil. 2 years in my forest, and you never knew I was watching. Learning about you. Learning what makes you afraid, what makes you brave, what makes you break. Marcus fired his weapon. All 6 remaining rounds, one after another, each bullet disappearing into the thing's torso without effect. The sound of the gunshots was absorbed by the forest, becoming whispers and then silence. "Interesting," the thing said, looking down at the holes in its clothing. Holes that revealed nothing but more darkness underneath. Still clinging to the old rules. Still believing that metal and fire can protect you from what you don't understand. It gestured, and Marcus's empty gun crumbled to rust in his hands. "Let me show you the truth about this place," the thing continued, beginning to walk around us in a slow circle. "This forest, all forests, they're not what your kind thinks they are. They're not collections of trees and animals, they're something much older, much hungrier." As it spoke, the trees around us began to change. Their bark became flesh, their branches became arms, their roots became something I don't want to remember. The forest itself was alive, had always been alive, and everything we thought we knew about the natural world was a lie designed to keep us from seeing the truth. "Your people built your parks, your trails, your visitor centers," the thing said, its voice now coming from the transformed trees themselves. "You thought you were protecting nature, but nature doesn't need protection from you. You need protection from it." The child thing giggled and clapped its hands. "Show them the old ones. Show them who was here first." And suddenly, we could see them. Shapes moving within the flesh trees, faces pressing against the bark from the inside. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. People who had wandered into the forest over the years. Hikers, campers, researchers, rangers like ourselves. All of them incorporated into the living forest. All of them still conscious, still aware, still screaming. "Every missing person," the thing said conversationally. "Every unexplained disappearance. Every search that ended with no trace found. They're all here, Ezra. They've always been here, becoming part of something greater than their individual selves." I could see movement in the bark nearest to me. A woman's face, her mouth open in an eternal silent scream, her eyes tracking my movement. Below her, a man's hand, fingers clawing weakly at the inside of his wooden prison. "That's impossible," Marcus whispered, but his voice cracked with the knowledge that what we were seeing was terrifyingly real. "Is it?" the thing asked, and now it was standing directly behind him. "You've felt it, haven't you? The forest watching you. The sense that you're never truly alone among the trees. You dismissed it as imagination, but your primitive brain knew the truth." The thing reached out with one impossibly long finger and touched Marcus on the shoulder. Where it made contact, his ranger uniform began to change, the fabric becoming rough like bark, spreading slowly across his body. "No," Marcus gasped, looking down at himself in horror. "No, this isn't real. This isn't happening." But it was. The bark-like substance was spreading up his arm across his chest, and wherever it touched, Marcus's movements became slower, more rigid. "Marcus!" I lunged forward, trying to grab him, but the circle of transformed people closed in, blocking my path. "Don't worry," Naya said, her voice now layered with harmonics that human throats shouldn't be able to produce. "He'll be much happier as part of the collective. No more worry, no more fear, no more individual suffering, just the peace of being part of something eternal." Marcus tried to run, but his legs were already too stiff, too wooden. He fell to his knees, and where his hands touched the ground, Roots began to sprout, anchoring him to the earth. "This is what I offered Naya," the thing said, now standing beside me. "What I offer all of them. The chance to become part of something that was ancient when your species was still learning to make fire." "You're insane," I said, backing away from the thing. "You're all insane." "Sanity," the thing mused, "is a concept created by limited minds to explain what they cannot understand. What you call insanity, I call evolution." Marcus was up to his chest in bark now, his face a mask of terror as the transformation continued. But in his eyes I could see something even worse. A growing peace, a terrible acceptance as whatever made him who he was began to be absorbed into the collective consciousness of the forest. His knowledge, his memories, his skills, the thing said. All of it will become part of the whole. Nothing wasted, nothing lost. Can your civilization say the same? I had to do something. I couldn't save Marcus, he was too far gone, but maybe I could still escape. Maybe I could warn others. Maybe. The thing laughed, and the sound made reality ripple like water. "Oh, Ezra, still thinking in terms of escape? Still believing this is something that can be fought or fled from?" It gestured, and suddenly we weren't in the forest anymore. We were standing in a vast space that stretched beyond the horizon in every direction. The ground beneath our feet was made of interwoven roots and branches, all of them pulsing with a slow, organic rhythm. Above us, instead of sky, was a canopy so dense and complex that it seemed to fold in on itself, creating impossible geometries that hurt to look at. And embedded in the walls, the floor, the ceiling were people, thousands of them, tens of thousands. All conscious, all aware, all part of the living structure of this place. "Welcome," the thing said, spreading its arms wide, "to the truth behind every forest on Earth, the network that connects all growing things, all living systems. Your kind sees trees and animals and thinks you understand ecology, but you've never seen the real ecosystem, the one where consciousness itself is the resource being cultivated." I could hear them, all of them. A whisper that rose and fell like breathing, composed of thousands of individual voices, all speaking in perfect unison. They were sharing thoughts, memories, experiences, a collective consciousness that spanned continents and centuries. "And the beautiful part," the thing continued, "is that it's growing. Every forest that burns and regrows, every park that's established, every wilderness area that's protected, it all feeds the network, it all becomes part of the system." "Why are you showing me this?" I asked, though I was terrified of the answer. "Because you're special, Ezra," the thing said, and suddenly we were back in the small clearing where this had all begun. Marcus was completely transformed now, his face visible in the bark of a tree that definitely hadn't been there before. His eyes followed me, and in them was an expression of such blissful peace that it was more terrifying than any scream. "You're a ranger," the thing continued, "a protector of forests, a guide for the lost. When you join us, your knowledge of how to lure people into the wilderness will be invaluable." The circle of transformed people began to close in again. I could see my future in their faces, the loss of individual identity, the absorption into something vast and alien and wrong. But I also saw something else. Fear. Just a flicker, just for a moment, in the thing's ancient eyes. And I realized why it was taking so long to explain, why it felt the need to justify itself. It wasn't sure I would join willingly, and for some reason that mattered. "You need consent," I said suddenly. "Don't you? You can't just take us. We have to choose." The thing's face flickered through a dozen different expressions before settling on one I couldn't read. "Choose?" it said. "What makes you think this is about choice?" But I could see it in the way the transformed people moved, the way they watched me. They were waiting. They were all waiting for me to decide. "That's why you took Naya first," I continued, understanding flooding through me. "She was alone, isolated, easy to convince. But Marcus and we came looking for her. We're connected to the outside world. People know where we are." "Do they?" the thing asked, but its voice was less certain now. And that's when I heard it. Distant, but growing closer. The sound of helicopters, the choice. The sound of rotors cutting through air made every transformed person in the clearing turn their heads toward the sky. For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw something other than predatory confidence in their expressions. Uncertainty. That's our backup, I said, taking a step back from the circle. Sarah called it in when we didn't report. They're coming with search teams, with media, with questions that will need answers. The thing that led them flickered between forms more rapidly now, as if my words were causing it to lose control. They won't find anything, it said, but the words lacked the certainty it had displayed before. Won't they? I pressed. How many search teams have you had to deal with? How many investigations? How many reporters asking why so many people go missing in certain forests? The helicopter sound was getting closer, and with it came another sound, voices calling through megaphones. Search and rescue teams spreading out through the forest following protocol, documenting everything. You've been careful, I continued, backing toward what I hoped was the direction of the voices. Selective. A person here, a family there. Never enough to attract real attention. But tonight you got greedy. Naya stepped forward, her empty eyes now showing something that might have been emotion. He offered me paradise, she said, but her voice wavered. He showed me a world without pain, without loneliness, without fear. And what did you have to give up for it? I asked her directly. What did you lose? She was quiet for a long moment, her head tilted as if listening to something I couldn't hear. Everything, she whispered finally. I lost everything that made me. Me. The thing roared, a sound that shook the trees and made the ground beneath my feet tremble. Silence. You are part of something greater now. You are eternal. But doubt had been planted. I could see it spreading through the circle of transformed people like a virus. The blissful peace in their faces was cracking, revealing the horror underneath. Marcus, I called out to the tree that had been my partner. Marcus, I know you can hear me. This isn't evolution. This isn't paradise. It's just another kind of death. The tree shuddered, and I could swear I heard a voice, muffled and distant, saying my name. The helicopters were directly overhead now, and spotlight beams were beginning to pierce the canopy. The thing and its followers looked up with what could only be described as panic. They have thermal imaging, I said. They're going to see everything. The transformed people, the flesh trees, all of it. And then what? How do you explain this to the world? The world will understand, the thing said. But it was backing away now, deeper into the forest. In time, they will all understand. Will they? I asked. Or will they burn every forest on Earth to stop you? That stopped it cold. For the first time, the ancient thing looked genuinely afraid. You're a parasite, I realized aloud. You need the forest to survive, but you also need people to believe forests are safe, natural, good. If the truth gets out, if people start seeing forests as the threat they really are. No, the thing whispered. Every protected wilderness area will be clear-cut, I continued relentlessly. Every national park will be paved over. Every tree will be seen as a potential enemy. Your network will be destroyed and you'll starve. The spotlights found us then, blazing white light that made the transformed people cry out and scatter. In that harsh illumination, the illusion began to break down. The flesh trees wavered, becoming translucent. The impossible geometry of the place started to collapse back into normal forest. But the thing itself became more solid, more real, as if the light was feeding it instead of weakening it. You think your kind's capacity for destruction can threaten me? It snarled, growing larger, more monstrous. I have survived ice ages, volcanic winters, meteor impacts. I will survive your chainsaws and your fires. Maybe, I said, pulling out my emergency flare. But will you survive the truth? I pulled the trigger and red light exploded between us. In that crimson illumination, I saw the thing's true form for just an instant. Something so ancient and alien that my mind immediately began trying to forget what it had seen. But more importantly, the flare's light was visible to the helicopters above. They immediately began focusing their spotlights on our location, and I could hear the search teams calling out, getting closer. "Choose," the thing said urgently, shrinking back to its human-like form. "Join us willingly, or watch your species destroy everything you've spent your life protecting." Around us, the transformed people were beginning to return to human form, the collective consciousness that bound them weakening under the assault of outside attention. Naya collapsed to her knees, gasping like she was breathing for the first time in days. Marcus's tree form was wavering too, bark becoming flesh again, though he remained rooted to the ground. "I choose," I said, raising my voice so the approaching search teams could hear, "to let the world decide for itself." The thing's howl of rage shook the forest, but it was already beginning to fade, becoming translucent as the spell of this place broke down. The last thing I saw of it was its eyes, ancient, hungry, and full of promises of what would happen when we met again. Because we would meet again. I knew that with absolute certainty. The forest was just forest again by the time Sarah and the search teams reached us. Naya was catatonic but alive. Marcus was unconscious but breathing, and I was sitting against a perfectly normal Douglas fir, trying to convince myself that what I remembered had actually happened. But I knew it had. The evidence was there in the way Naya flinched away from trees, in the way Marcus refused to work in forests ever again, in the way every instinct I had screamed at me to run whenever I found myself surrounded by too many trees. After that was 5 years ago. The official report listed equipment malfunction and temporary disorientation due to hypothermia. Naya was treated for severe psychological trauma and made a full recovery, though she never spoke about what happened in the forest. Marcus took early retirement and moved to Kansas, where the only trees for miles are the ones people plant in their yards. And me? I moved to Arizona, where I can see the horizon in every direction and nothing can hide from the sun. But the thing was right about one aspect of its prediction. My knowledge of how to lure people into the wilderness has been invaluable, just not in the way it expected. I work now with a group that, well, let's just say we keep track of certain patterns: missing persons in national forests, equipment failures that follow specific signatures, reports of impossible phenomena from rangers and visitors who are too afraid to file official reports. Because the thing I encountered in Olympic was not unique. The network it described is real and it's growing. Every year more people disappear in protected wilderness areas. Every year the forests get a little hungrier. But every year more people like me, survivors who've seen the truth, work to warn others. We can't fight it directly. It's too old, too vast, too deeply integrated into the ecosystem of the planet. But we can limit its food supply. We can make sure people know the real rules of the wilderness. Never hike alone. Always tell someone your exact route and expected return time. If your equipment starts malfunctioning in specific patterns, GPS going haywire, compass spinning, radios producing unusual static, get out immediately. If you hear voices calling your name from the forest, especially voices of people you know who aren't with you, don't follow them. If you find evidence of recent camping in an area where no one should have been, leave the area immediately. Trust your instincts. If a forest feels wrong, if you feel watched, if you have the urge to go deeper into wilderness than planned, fight it. And most importantly, if you encounter people in the forest who seem wrong, too peaceful, too knowing, eyes that don't focus properly, do not trust them, no matter how much they might look like someone you're trying to help. I still have nightmares. I still wake up in the middle of the night thinking I hear that thing's voice calling my name across the desert. And sometimes when I'm driving past one of the small forests that dot the Arizona landscape, I swear I can see shapes moving between the trees, watching the road, waiting. The thing was right about something else too. The network is growing. Climate change is forcing people to seek refuge in wilderness areas. Urban expansion is creating more interfaces between civilization and forest. More protected areas are being established. More people are spending time in the woods, and every year the forests get a little hungrier. But now you know. Now you have the truth. And knowledge, as terrifying as it might be, is the only weapon we have against something that has been perfecting its hunting techniques since before our species existed. So please, if you're someone who loves the outdoors, who camps or hikes or works in forestry, be careful. Follow the rules. Trust your instincts. And remember that the most dangerous predator in any forest might not be a bear or a mountain lion. It might be the forest itself. This has been my account of what happened in Olympic National Park in October of 2019. I hope to God that none of you ever have to experience anything like it. But if you do, remember that you have a choice. And remember that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is run. Thank you for listening. And stay safe out there. End of recording. Addendum. This recording was submitted to the channel by Ezra Blackwood in January 2025. Attempts to verify details of the case through official channels have been unsuccessful due to administrative confidentiality policies. However, missing person reports matching the description of Nia Thornfield were filed in Portland, Oregon in October 2019. Marcus Chen is confirmed to have taken early retirement from the National Park Service in 2020. Ezra Blackwood's current employment could not be verified. The channel reminds listeners that this account, like all real stories shared here, should be taken seriously, regardless of how impossible it might seem. If you have experienced anything similar, please reach out through our secure contact methods. Remember, the wilderness doesn't follow the rules of civilization. Stay alert, stay alive. There are sounds a person should never hear. Voices calling your name in the darkness of an empty forest. A child crying from places where there haven't been children for miles. The sound of footsteps following you. But when you turn around, nothing. My name is Garrett Thorne and I'm 34 years old. I currently live in the Arizona desert where the silence is different. Dry, clean, without echoes. But 6 years ago, I worked as a forest ranger at Olympic National Park in Washington. What I'm about to tell you is the reason I left that job, moved to the other side of the country, and could never again enter a forest alone. Sorry if my voice breaks at some moments. This is the first time I'm telling this completely to someone outside of therapy. My wife thinks I should keep this to myself, but you who follow real stories deserve to know that there are things out there, things that people like me should protect you from, but sometimes we can't. It was October 2019. I had 5 years of experience at Olympic, knew every trail, every ravine, every dangerous area. I thought I knew every sound of the forest. I was wrong. The disappearance. Vera vanished on a Tuesday. Wildlife photographer from Portland, 28 years old. Red hair that looked like fire when sunlight filtered through the tree canopy. She had special permission to document elk migration in the Hoh River Valley region. A competent professional, not the type of person who gets lost. Her last radio communication was at 3:37 p.m. Base, this is Kestrel. Found a group of bull elk near Delta 7 checkpoint. I'm setting up camp and waiting for sunset for the photos. Next check-in at 1800 hours. Her voice sounded excited, professional, normal. 6 o'clock came and went. Then 7. At 7:30 p.m., we initiated search protocol. The funny thing about the desert here in Arizona is that when the sun sets, you see exactly where it's going. Straight line on the horizon, no trees blocking the view. At Olympic in October, darkness seeps between the trees like water, rising from the ground, descending from the sky, until you realize you're surrounded by it without knowing exactly when it happened. We found Vera's campsite intact, tent properly set up, expensive photography equipment scattered as if she had left quickly to capture something. Her main camera was still on, with the last photo timestamped at 5:14 p.m. A group of elk grazing peacefully. Nothing abnormal. Except for one thing. Her left boot was in the middle of the campsite. Just one. As if she had simply stepped out of it. First signs. We set up base operations at Vera's campsite. 4-person team, me as leader, Torres, tracking specialist, Mackenzie, paramedic, and Bradley, communications. Standard search and rescue protocol for a missing photographer. Should have been routine. The first weird thing happened around 9 p.m. Bradley was setting up the radio relay when he stopped mid-sentence. "You guys hear that?" We all froze. In the distance, maybe a quarter-mile north, we could hear what sounded like a child crying. Soft, heartbroken sobs echoing through the trees. Torres grabbed his flashlight. Could be an injured hiker, kid separated from family. But I'd been working Olympic for 5 years. I knew every family camping permit issued that week. No children registered in this sector. The nearest family campground was 12 miles south. "Base, this is Ranger Thorne," I radioed to headquarters, requesting status on any missing children reports in Sector 7. Static. Then, "Negative, Thorne. No missing children reports. No family permits in your sector." The crying continued for exactly 17 minutes. I timed it. Then it stopped so abruptly it left our ears ringing from the sudden silence. Mackenzie was checking her equipment when she looked up. "Garrett, my thermal scanner is picking up movement, about 200 yards northeast. Heat signature of an adult, moving slowly. Could be Vera," Torres said, already shouldering his pack. We followed the thermal reading for 20 minutes, crashing through underbrush, calling Vera's name. The signature stayed exactly 200 yards ahead of us no matter how fast we moved, like it was leading us somewhere. Then it vanished. Not gradually, just gone, like someone had flipped a switch. That's when Bradley's radio started acting up. Static burst in patterns that almost sounded like Morse code. Then, clear as day, a voice came through. "Help me, please, I'm so cold." A woman's voice, scared. Could have been Vera. "Vera. Vera, if you can hear this, key your radio twice." The silence, then 2 clear clicks. "Vera, what's your location? Can you see our flashlights?" The voice came back, but something was wrong with it. Too echoey, like it was coming from inside a cave. "I can see you. You're so far away. Why won't you come closer?" Torres was already moving toward the voice. That's when I grabbed his arm. "Wait." Something about the voice bothered me. In 5 years at Olympic, I'd dealt with dozens of lost hikers, injured climbers, panicked campers. Scared people sound different. They're breathless, urgent, specific about their injuries or location. This voice was too calm, like someone reading lines. "Vera, we need you to activate your emergency beacon so we can triangulate your position." Long pause. Then, "My beacon. I think it's broken." "Everything's broken. Please just follow my voice." That's when Mackenzie grabbed my shoulder. She was staring at her thermal scanner, face pale. "Garrett, the voice is coming from due north, but my scanner is showing heat signatures to the south. 3 of them, moving in formation." We all went silent. In the distance, the voice continued calling, "Please, I'm hurt. I can't move. Please come find me." But on Mackenzie's scanner, 3 human-sized heat signatures were circling our position. "Pack up," I whispered. "Now." The hunt begins. We retreated to Vera's campsite, but something had changed. Her scattered photography equipment was now arranged in a perfect circle around the tent. Her remaining boot was sitting upright in the center, like some kind of shrine. "Nobody touch anything," I ordered, but Torres was already kneeling next to the boot. "There's something inside." He turned it over and a Polaroid photograph fell out. The image was overexposed, but you could make out a figure standing between trees. Too distant and blurry to identify, but definitely human. Mackenzie held it up to her flashlight. This wasn't taken with Vera's camera. Her equipment is all digital. Bradley had gotten the radio working again, but now it was picking up fragments of conversation. "Saw her first. My turn to... Been too long since... Different voices. Male. Definitely not Vera." I tried calling headquarters again, but got nothing but static. Our satellite phone showed no signal, impossible in this area. Even our GPS units were spinning wildly, showing us simultaneously in 3 different locations. That's when we heard the footsteps. Slow, deliberate, circling our campsite just beyond the range of our flashlights. Multiple sets moving in coordination. "Olympic Rangers," I called out. "Identify yourselves." The footsteps stopped. Then, from the darkness, a voice I'd never heard before. "We know you're looking for the photographer." Male voice, calm, educated, with just a hint of southern accent. "Do you have information about Vera Kestrel's whereabouts?" Soft laughter from the shadows. "Oh, I have more than information, Ranger Thorne." He knew my name. I'd never identified myself to anyone outside of radio contact with headquarters. "She's with us now, safe and sound. Why don't you come see for yourself?" Torres was reaching for his sidearm, but I shook my head. Whoever was out there had been watching us, listening to our radio communications. They knew our names, our equipment, probably our standard procedures. "If Vera is safe, have her contact us on her radio." Another laugh. "Oh, she can't do that. You see, she's sleeping, but she'll wake up soon. They always do, right before the end." That's when I realized we weren't dealing with a missing person case anymore. We were dealing with someone who had taken her. "Bradley, Emergency Protocol 7, I whispered. "Code for call in backup and prepare for hostile situation." But when Bradley tried his radio, a voice came back that sounded exactly like mine. "Disregard previous request. All units maintain current positions. This is a false alarm." Whoever was out there had been listening long enough to learn our radio protocols, maybe even our voices. The footsteps resumed, closer now, and underneath them, a new sound that made my blood freeze, dragging, like something heavy being pulled across the forest floor. Deeper into the dark. We broke camp immediately, but every trail seemed to lead us in circles. After 2 hours of hiking, we found ourselves back at Vera's original campsite. Same tent, same equipment circle, same boot. Except now there were photographs scattered everywhere. Dozens of Polaroids, all showing the same thing. Our team, from different angles, taken throughout the night. Us setting up equipment. Us examining Vera's boot. Us talking by the radio. Someone had been documenting our every move. Torres was studying the photos when he went rigid. "Garrett, look at this one." The photo showed all 4 of us standing around the campsite, but in the background, barely visible between the trees, were shapes, human figures watching us. 5 of them, standing perfectly still. "These were taken with a flash," Mackenzie said. "We would have seen it." "Not if we were distracted," I replied, remembering the child crying, the radio voices. "Someone's been playing games with us all night." That's when Bradley made a choking sound. He was staring at one of the photos, his face white. "This shows 5 people in our group." I grabbed the photo. He was right. 4 figures I could identify as us, and a 5th person standing slightly apart. The image was too dark to make out details, but the 5th figure appeared to be wearing ranger gear. "Could be an old photo from a previous search," Torres suggested, but he didn't sound convinced. I counted us. Me, Torres, Mackenzie, Bradley. 4 people. The dragging sound was getting closer. "We need to get to higher ground," I decided. "Find a defensible position and call for backup on the emergency frequency." We started climbing toward Eagle's Ridge, a rocky outcrop about a mile east. The trail was steep and treacherous at night, but it would give us a view of the surrounding area and better radio reception. Halfway up, Mackenzie's thermal scanner went crazy, heat signatures everywhere, ahead of us, behind us, on both sides, moving in coordination like a military unit. "How many?" I asked. "I count 8. No, wait." She shook the device. 12. "No, that's not right either. The readings keep changing." From somewhere in the darkness, a child started crying again, but this time it was closer and it sounded different. Not sad crying, terrified, screaming. "Mommy! Mommy, help me! Please don't let them!" The scream cut off abruptly. Torres was already running toward the sound, but I tackled him. "It's a trap. There are no children out here." "But what if—" "There are no children." From the ridge above us, a voice called down, the same southern accent from earlier. "Ranger Thorn, you're quite right. There are no children here, but there will be sounds of children for as long as I want there to be." A powerful flashlight beam hit us from above, blinding. "You see, gentlemen, and lady, I've been hunting in these woods for 7 years. I know every sound that carries, every echo, every way to make you hear exactly what I want you to hear." Another voice from behind us. "Military sound equipment. Portable speakers, child's play, really." We were surrounded. "What do you want?" I called out. "What does any hunter want, Ranger Thorn? The thrill of the chase, the satisfaction of the catch, and you've made this so much more interesting than usual." "Where's Vera Kestrel?" Long pause. Then, "She's alive, for now. Whether she stays that way depends on how entertaining you continue to be." That's when I heard something that made my skin crawl. From multiple directions around us, the sound of radios crackling to life. Our voices recorded from throughout the night playing back in a confused jumble. Vera, if you can hear this. Olympic Rangers, identify. Emergency Protocol 7. I'm so cold, please help." They'd been recording everything, playing our own voices back at us. "Psychological warfare," Mackenzie whispered. "They're trying to break us down." But even as she said it, I could hear the fear in her voice, and something else that made my heart sink. Our equipment was failing, flashlights dimming despite fresh batteries, radio giving nothing but static, GPS units showing impossible readings. Either these people were incredibly sophisticated, or something else was happening here. The truth in the photos. We made it to Eagle's Ridge just as dawn was breaking. From up there, you could see the entire valley spread out below. Miles of dense forest, mist rising from the rivers, and not another human being in sight. Except we knew they were there, watching, waiting. Bradley got the emergency radio working long enough to send a distress call, but the response we got back wasn't from headquarters. "Olympic Base to Ranger Thorn. Report status on Kestrel search." It was my supervisor's voice, but something was off about it. Too flat, like a recording. "This is Thorn. We have a hostile situation. Multiple suspects in the area. Request immediate backup and air support." "Negative, Thorn. Maintain current position and continue search. Weather conditions prevent air support." I looked up. Clear October sky, no wind, perfect visibility. "Sir, weather conditions are optimal. We need—" The radio went dead. Torres was examining the Polaroid photos we'd collected. "Garrett, you need to see this." He had them arranged in chronological order based on the timestamps. What they showed made no sense. The first photos showed our team arriving at Vera's campsite. Normal. The middle photos showed us setting up equipment, searching the area. Still normal. But the later photos, something was wrong with them. In each successive image, our team looked different, more ragged, more frightened, and the backgrounds were changing. "This photo shows us at the campsite," Torres said, "but look at the trees. They're arranged completely differently than in the earlier shots." He was right. Same campsite, same tent, but the forest around it looked like a different place entirely. "Maybe different angle?" Mackenzie suggested. "No, look at this one, then this one." Torres laid out 2 photos side by side. These were taken 10 minutes apart according to the timestamps. But in the first one, there's a large boulder behind my left shoulder. In the second one, it's gone. I studied the photos. He was absolutely right. The landscape itself seemed to be changing. "Equipment malfunction," I said, but I didn't believe it myself. The last photo in the sequence was the most disturbing. It showed all four of us standing on Eagle's Ridge, exactly where we were now, but our faces were wrong. Older, more weathered, like we'd been out here for weeks instead of hours. And in the background, barely visible, stood a figure in ranger uniform. The figure was holding up a sign that read, "Help me." "When was this taken?" I asked. Torres checked the timestamp. According to this, 20 minutes from now. That's when the screaming started. The thing in ranger clothes. The screaming was coming from the forest below us, a woman's voice, high and terrified, echoing off the valley walls in ways that made my skin crawl. "That's Vera," Mackenzie said. "It has to be." But even as she said it, I could hear the artificial quality to the sound, like the child crying from the night before. It was too perfect, too theatrical. Real terror has a rawness to it, a quality that can't be faked. "Help me! Oh God, please! Somebody help me!" The voice was moving through the forest, getting closer to our position, but the acoustics were wrong. Sound doesn't travel uphill that clearly, not through dense forest. "Please, I got away, but they're coming. I can hear them behind me." Torres was already starting down the ridge, his hand on his sidearm, but I grabbed him again. Think about it. If Vera escaped, why isn't she using her radio? Why isn't she heading for the main trail where she knows we'd look for her? Maybe her radio's broken. Maybe she's disoriented, running blind. Or maybe it's not Vera at all. The screaming stopped abruptly, cutting off mid-syllable. The silence that followed was so complete it felt like pressure against our eardrums. Then, from much closer than should have been possible, a calm voice. "Very good, Ranger Thorne, you're starting to learn." A figure stepped out from behind a boulder about 50 yards away. Tall, lean, wearing what looked like Forest Service gear. But something was fundamentally wrong with the way he moved. Too fluid, like he was floating instead of walking. And his uniform, which had looked normal from a distance, was torn and stained with something dark. "I must say, you're more perceptive than most. It usually takes hours longer for them to stop believing the recordings." He gestured to the forest below with a hand that was too pale, too thin. "Your photographer friend tried to run when she realized what was happening. Didn't get very far, I'm afraid. None of them ever do." "Who are you?" I called out, but I was already starting to suspect the answer. The figure tilted his head at an angle that was just slightly too far to be natural. "Does it matter? I've been so many people over the years. Rangers who got lost, hikers who never made it home, photographers who saw too much." He held up what looked like a radio, but when I squinted, I could see it was just a piece of rotted wood shaped like one. "Would you like to hear your real headquarters?" Static filled the air, then panicked voices. "Search team overdue by 18 hours. No radio contact since initial deployment. Organizing full search and rescue, all available units. Families are asking questions we can't answer. You see, gentleman and lady, you've been missing for 19 hours. Your families are quite worried." I looked at my watch. According to it, we'd been out here for 4 hours, not 19. But when I looked closer, the hands were moving backward. "Time moves differently in my woods," the figure said, as if reading my thoughts. "Sometimes faster, sometimes slower. Sometimes it stops altogether. Depends on what I need." Mackenzie was backing away from the figure, her thermal scanner beeping frantically in patterns I'd never heard before. "Garrett, I'm not getting a heat signature from him. At all. It's like he's not even there." The figure laughed, and the sound echoed from multiple directions simultaneously. "Of course not, dear. I've been dead for 3 years." He reached up and pulled off what I'd thought was a ranger hat. Underneath, his skull was caved in on one side, dried blood and brain matter matting what remained of his hair. Forest debris, leaves, twigs, small insects, fell from the wound as he moved. Fell from Eagle's Ridge during a search operation. Very tragic. My body was never recovered, you know. Torres had his weapon drawn but wasn't firing. I could see the conflict in his face. Training said to eliminate the threat. But how do you shoot something that's already dead? "You're not real," Bradley whispered. "Oh, I'm very real. Just not alive. There's a significant difference." He gestured to the forest around us, and as he did, the trees began to shift and change, branches reaching toward us with finger-like twigs, trunks twisting into faces, leaves rustling without any wind. "This is my territory now, my hunting ground, and you, my friends, are my prey." "But you're a ranger," Mackenzie said. "You're supposed to protect people." The dead thing that had once been a man smiled, and his teeth were black with decay. "I protected people for 6 years, and what did it get me? A shallow grave and a family that moved on." His form began to shift, becoming less solid, more shadow. "But death gives you perspective. Death shows you what really matters." "Which is?" "Power. The power to make people experience anything you want them to experience. Fear, pain, despair, or hope, right before you take it away." That's when Torres opened fire. When the dead hunt the living. Torres put 3 rounds center mass into the figure. The shots echoed across the valley, and for a moment everything was silent. The figure looked down at the bullet holes in his chest, then back up at us. Rude. The holes sealed themselves, fabric mending like water flowing back together. But ineffective. He raised his hand, and Torres's weapon flew out of his grip, sailing over the edge of the ridge. Now where were we? Ah, yes. The hunt. The forest around us erupted with sound. Footsteps from every direction, voices calling our names, equipment beeping and crackling. But through Mackenzie's thermal scanner, I could see the truth. There was nothing out there. No heat signatures at all. It's all fake, I realized. The sounds, the voices, even the people we thought were hunting us. It's just him. The figure smiled, and his teeth were black with decay. Very good. Yes, I can make you hear anything I want, see anything I want. Your equipment responds to my will now. He snapped his fingers, and our flashlights died simultaneously. I can make you experience any reality I choose. The question is, what would frighten you most? The world around us began to change. The rocky ridge we were standing on started to shift and blur like looking through water. The forest below stretched and warped, trees growing taller, shadows deepening. Mackenzie experienced her fear first. She was screaming, but I couldn't see why. To me, she appeared to be swatting at empty air, but she was acting like something was crawling all over her. Spiders, the figure explained. Thousands of them. That's her deepest fear, you know. I can see these things. Bradley was next. His eyes went wide, and he started backing toward the edge of the ridge. Bradley's afraid of heights. Specifically, of falling. So for him, this ridge is now 1,000 feet high, and the ground is calling to him. "Stop it," I shouted. "But we haven't gotten to you yet, Ranger Thorne, and you're the most interesting of all." Torres was firing his sidearm at something I couldn't see, shouting military commands. The figure nodded approvingly. Combat stress response. He's reliving Afghanistan, but this time his unit doesn't make it out. The dead ranger turned to me. "But you, Garrett, your fear isn't of any creature or situation. Your fear is of failure, of being responsible for other people's deaths." Around me, my team was trapped in their own personal hells, and I was powerless to help them. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to watch them die one by one, knowing that if you'd been smarter, faster, better at your job, you could have saved them. And then you're going to join them, and your families will never know what really happened. Mackenzie had collapsed, covered in imaginary spiders. Bradley was teetering on the edge of the ridge, seeing a drop that wasn't there. Torres had run out of ammunition and was being overrun by enemies only he could see. That's when I remembered something from the photos. The final photo. The last Polaroid Torres had shown me, the one with the timestamp 20 minutes in the future. It showed our team on Eagle's Ridge, looking older and more weathered. But it also showed a figure in the background holding a sign, "Help me." I looked at the dead ranger and suddenly understood. "You're not the hunter," I said. "You're trapped here too." His confident smile faltered. "When you died on this ridge, you didn't move on, you got stuck, and now you can't leave, so you make others stay with you." "Shut up." "But you don't want to hurt people. You want them to help you. That's why you take their photos, document everything. You're trying to tell someone what happened to you." The illusions around my team began to waver. The real hunters were human. They killed you during that search operation 3 years ago. Made it look like an accident. I said, "Shut up." The forest was shifting back to normal. Mackenzie stopped screaming. Bradley stepped away from the edge. "You've been trying to show someone the truth. The photos, the voices, even bringing us here. It's all been a cry for help." The dead ranger's form was becoming less solid, more transparent. "They're still out there," he whispered. "The real hunters. They killed me because I found out what they were doing to the missing hikers." "Who were they?" "Ex-military, survivalists. They use the park as their private hunting preserve. Human prey." His voice was fading. "Vera, she's still alive. They keep them alive for days before. They have a compound, hidden in the old growth sector, cave system near Whisper Creek." "How do we find it?" But he was already disappearing. "Follow the real trail, not the ones I showed you. The real trail leads." His voice faded to nothing. We stood alone on Eagle's Ridge in the pale morning light, our equipment suddenly working again. "The real hunt. Base, this is Ranger Thorne. Do you copy?" "Thorne? Jesus, where have you been? You've been dark for 19 hours. 19 hours. The dead ranger had been right about time moving differently. "We have the location of a possible hostage situation, requesting immediate backup and tactical support." "Copy that. What's your situation?" I looked at my team. Mackenzie was treating Torres for shock. Bradley was getting our GPS coordinates. All of them looked exhausted but alive. "We're dealing with multiple hostiles who have taken Vera Kestrel captive. Suspects are ex-military, well-armed, and familiar with the terrain. They may be responsible for other missing persons cases." "Understood. Tactical team is inbound. ETA 40 minutes. The real trail to Whisper Creek was barely visible, overgrown, and deliberately concealed. But once we knew what to look for, we could follow it. The dead ranger's illusions had hidden it from us, but they'd also kept us from walking into an ambush. We found the compound just as the tactical team arrived. 3 trailers hidden in a natural cave system, connected by camouflaged walkways. Professional setup, military precision. But approaching it felt wrong in ways I still can't explain. The temperature dropped 20 degrees as we got closer. Our equipment started malfunctioning again. Radios crackling with voices that shouldn't be there. Thermal scanners showing impossible readings. Even the tactical team's military-grade gear was acting up. "Something's not right here," their team leader whispered to me. Sergeant Rodriguez, 20-year veteran who'd seen action in 3 different wars. My men are reporting strange sounds. Voices calling for help from inside the cave system. But thermal shows no movement. That's when we realized the dead ranger was still with us, still trying to help. The voices our equipment was picking up weren't random. They were warnings. Marcus Webb was guiding us around booby traps, alerting us to hidden weapons caches, showing us safe approaches to the compound. Every time we moved in the direction the false voices indicated, we found evidence of the killer's operation. Tripwires connected to explosives. Motion sensors linked to automatic weapons. Bear traps hidden under leaves. "Jesus Christ," Rodriguez muttered as we disarmed the 7th trap. "How did you know these were here?" I couldn't tell him about the dead ranger's voice in my earpiece, warning me exactly where to step. So I just said, "Experience." The actual raid took 3 hours. The killers had turned the cave system into a fortress, with multiple escape routes and kill zones designed to eliminate anyone who found their location. Without Marcus Webb's supernatural guidance, half the tactical team would have died in the first 5 minutes. But the hardest part was what we found inside. The main trailer was set up like a command center, with detailed maps of hiking trails, camping areas, and ranger patrol routes. Red pins marked where they'd taken victims over 7 years. Yellow pins showed where they'd disposed of the bodies. 17 red pins, 43 yellow pins. They hadn't just been killing the people they captured. They'd been collecting trophies from hikers they'd murdered and left for the animals to find, making their deaths look like accidents or animal attacks. In the second trailer, we found Vera. I've seen a lot of trauma in my years as a ranger, but nothing prepared me for what they'd done to her. She was conscious when we found her, but her eyes were empty, completely empty, like she was looking through us at something far away. She didn't speak for the first 3 days after we rescued her, just stared at the hospital ceiling, occasionally whimpering when someone approached too quickly. The medical report said she'd been tortured systematically, not for information, but for entertainment. Psychological breaks interspersed with physical pain, designed to stretch out their game for as long as possible. The thing that still haunts me is that she kept asking for Marcus. "Where's the ranger who helped me?" she'd whisper when she finally started talking. "The one with the kind eyes. He stayed with me at night, told me stories to keep me calm." "Where is he?" She described Marcus Webb perfectly, down to his service uniform and the scar on his left hand from a childhood accident. Details that were never in any official report. But Marcus had been dead for 3 years. The killers themselves were almost anticlimactic after everything we'd experienced. 5 middle-aged men, ex-military like Marcus had said, who'd found each other through online survivalist forums. They'd started with hunting animals, then graduated to homeless people in urban areas, and finally settled on the Olympic Forest as their permanent hunting ground. Their leader was a former Army Ranger named Clayton Pierce, dishonorably discharged for excessive violence during interrogations in Iraq. He'd convinced the others that hunting humans was a natural evolution of their skills. "We were apex predators," he said during his confession. "Society had made us soft, domestic. This was about reclaiming our true nature." When I asked him about Marcus Webb, his whole demeanor changed. "That wasn't supposed to happen," he said, suddenly looking older, more fragile. "Webb wasn't part of the game. He was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. You murdered a federal officer." He wouldn't stop asking questions, kept coming back to areas where we'd been active. We tried to scare him off, but he was too persistent. Pierce's hands were shaking as he talked. We cornered him up on Eagles Ridge, told him to transfer out or forget what he'd seen, but he said he had a duty to protect people. "So you killed him?" Davies pushed him. "It was supposed to look like an accident, but..." Pierce trailed off, staring at something behind me. "He keeps coming back." I turned around. Nobody there. "Who keeps coming back?" "Webb. He's been hunting us ever since. Every night in these woods we'd hear him on the radio, see him watching us from the trees. Equipment would malfunction when he was around." Pierce looked directly at me and I saw genuine terror in his eyes. "How do you think you found us so easily?" 7 years we stayed hidden. FBI couldn't find us, state police couldn't find us. But one night with that dead ranger helping you and suddenly you walk right to our front door." He was right. Without Marcus Webb's supernatural intervention, we never would have found the compound. The real trails were too well hidden, the booby traps too sophisticated. Marcus had been hunting them just as relentlessly as they'd been hunting innocent people. The trial lasted 6 months. All 5 men received life sentences without possibility of parole. The families of their victims finally had closure, though the knowledge of what their loved ones had endured was almost worse than not knowing. During the sentencing, Pierce looked directly at me from across the courtroom. "He's still out there," he mouthed silently. "He'll never stop." I visited Marcus Webb's grave 3 times during the trial. Each time I left a copy of the case files, detailing exactly what had happened to his killers. His name was Marcus Webb. 29 years old, worked for the Forest Service for 6 years. Had a wife named Sarah and 2 young daughters, Emma, age 4, and Sophie, age 6. I told Sarah everything, about how her husband had died trying to protect innocent people, about how he'd continued protecting people even after death, about how without his help, Vera Kestrel would have died and 5 killers would still be free. She listened quietly, holding a photo of Marcus in his ranger uniform. He always said the forest was alive, she told me. Said it had a memory and that good people who died there didn't really leave. She paused, looking out the window at their backyard. The girls sometimes say they can hear Daddy talking to them at night. I always thought it was just wishful thinking, but what? Last week, Emma drew a picture of him in his uniform. She said he told her to draw it for the man who helped him catch the bad people. She handed me a child's crayon drawing, a stick figure in a green uniform standing next to 4 other stick figures. At the bottom, in a 4-year-old's handwriting, "Thank you for helping Daddy." I still have that drawing. The sounds that follow. I requested a transfer 2 weeks after the trial ended. Couldn't stay in those woods knowing what I'd experienced. The sounds, the impossible things, the way reality had bent around us like it was made of water. My supervisor understood. PTSD from the hostage situation, he said. Completely normal reaction. But it wasn't PTSD. It was the knowledge that there are things in this world that don't follow the rules we think we know. Dead rangers who can manipulate reality. Time that moves at different speeds. Equipment that stops working when something wants it to. The department offered me counseling, medical leave, desk duty, anything to keep me in the service. I'd been decorated for the Kestrel case, labeled a hero for uncovering the murder ring. But they didn't understand what had really happened out there. How do you explain to a psychiatrist that a dead colleague guided you through a supernatural maze? That time moved differently while you were being hunted by both human killers and ghostly forces? That your radio picked up conversations from the afterlife? I tried once. Dr. Patricia Brennan, department psychologist. Nice woman, very understanding. She listened patiently as I explained about Marcus Webb's interventions, the impossible photographs, the equipment malfunctions that couldn't be explained by EMF interference or magnetic anomalies. Trauma can manifest in many ways, Garrett, she said gently. Sometimes our minds create explanations for experiences that were too overwhelming to process normally. But the other team members experienced it too. We all heard the voices, saw the impossible things. Group hysteria is well documented in high-stress situations. When people are pushed beyond their limits, they can share hallucinations, false memories, even... I stopped going to the sessions after that. Because the sounds didn't stop when I left the Olympic Forest. They followed me. I moved to Arizona because the desert is honest. What you see is what's there. No hidden trails, no voices in the darkness, no trees that rearrange themselves when you're not looking. The landscape here doesn't lie or play tricks or bend reality around supernatural interventions. For the first few months, it worked. Clean silence, clear horizons, no mysteries. I got a job with the Arizona State Park System, working search and rescue in the Sonoran Desert. Different environment, different challenges, but the same core mission, helping people who were lost. But sometimes late at night, I still hear them. The sounds that a person should never hear. Footsteps in my backyard, but no one there when I look. Voices calling my name from the empty lot next door. And sometimes, just sometimes, the sound of a radio crackling with a voice I recognize. Thank you, Ranger Thorne. Marcus Webb's voice, clear as day, coming through electronic devices that aren't even turned on. The first time it happened, I was watching TV in my living room. The screen went to static, then his voice came through the speakers. The families have closure now, that's all I wanted. I checked every electronic device in the house. Nothing was connected to a radio frequency. The cable box was off. My phone was in airplane mode. But his voice continued. Pierce was right, you know. I'll never stop. There are others out there, in other forests, other parks. People like me who died trying to protect innocence. Marcus, I said to the empty room, you have a gift, Garrett. You can hear us when others can't, see us when others can't. That's why I was able to reach you that night. I don't want this gift. Silence for a long moment. Then, neither did I. But some responsibilities follow us beyond death. The voices have continued sporadically for 6 years now, always through electronic devices, always when I'm alone, and always with the same message. There are others, other dead rangers who died protecting parks from human predators. Other spirits trapped between worlds, trying to guide the living toward justice. Other places where reality bends around tragedy and loss. I like to think Marcus has found peace, that helping us save Vera and bring his killers to justice allowed him to move on. But deep down, I know the truth. Some sounds follow you forever. And some places never let you go, no matter how far you run. Here in Arizona, the silence is clean and dry, but at night, when the wind picks up and carries the scent of distant forests, I swear I can still hear the Olympic calling. And sometimes I'm tempted to answer. Last month, I got a call from a ranger in Yellowstone. Missing hiker, strange circumstances, equipment malfunctions during the search. The kind of case that makes experienced searchers scratch their heads and file incomplete reports. We heard about your work on the Kestrel case, he said, wondering if you might consult unofficially. I told him I'd retired from that kind of work, moved on, found peace in the desert. But as I hung up the phone, I could hear Marcus Webb's voice whispering through the static. They need you, Garrett. The living and the dead. I booked a flight to Wyoming that same night. Because some calls you can't ignore, even when you know answering them will drag you back into a world where the impossible becomes routine, where the dead hunt alongside the living, and where silence is never really silent. The desert will be here when I get back. Clean, honest, predictable. But there are forests full of secrets, and people who need help that only someone like me can provide. Someone who can hear the voices others can't. Someone who knows that death isn't always the end of the hunt. Yet this happened 6 years ago, but I still can't bring myself to go camping with my family. My wife Sarah thinks it's because of the trauma from the hostage situation, and I let her believe that. It's easier than trying to explain that some places are alive in ways that don't make sense, that the forest itself can become a predator. The real killers are in federal prison, serving life sentences without possibility of parole. Clayton Pierce died in his cell last year. Heart attack, the official report said. But the letter I received from Marcus Webb's widow suggests otherwise. He visited me in a dream, she wrote. Marcus, I mean. He said Pierce finally paid for what he did. Said justice doesn't always come from a courtroom. I didn't respond to her letter. What could I say? That her dead husband was still out there, still protecting people, still settling scores. Vera recovered mostly, and still takes photographs, though she sticks to urban environments now. She sends me Christmas cards every year, always with the same message. Thank you for bringing me home. But she never asks about the details of her rescue, and I never offer them. My team all transferred to different parks, different states. We don't keep in touch, but I know they hear the sounds too. Mackenzie started a blog about paranormal experiences in national parks. She never mentions the Kestrel case specifically, but her writing suggests she's had other encounters with things that shouldn't exist. Torres left the Park Service entirely and became a private security consultant. According to his LinkedIn profile, he specializes in unusual threat assessment. I have a feeling I know what that means. Bradley went back to school, got a degree in electronic engineering, and now works for a company that investigates electromagnetic anomalies. His research papers have titles like temporal distortion in localized electromagnetic fields, and post-human communication through electronic media. We all found ways to cope with what we experienced, but none of us forgot. Because some things, once you've experienced them, never really let you go. And late at night when I'm lying in bed in the Arizona desert, listening to the clean, honest silence, I can still hear Olympic National Park calling my name. Softly, patiently, waiting for me to come home. But I know now that home isn't always a place you want to return to. Sometimes it's a place that won't let you leave, even when you're 1,000 miles away. Even when you've built a new life in the desert, even when you tell yourself that the dead can't really speak through electronic devices, and that time doesn't actually move differently in certain forests, and that thermal scanners can't fail to detect things that are standing right in front of you. But tonight, as I finish telling this story, my radio is crackling with static. And through that static, I can hear a familiar voice. Thank you for remembering, Garrett. Thank you for telling the truth. Marcus Webb's voice, clear as the day I first heard it echoing through the Olympic forest. I should turn off the radio, unplug it, remove the batteries. But I don't. Because somewhere out there, in forests I've never seen, there are other people who need help that only someone like me can provide. Other missing persons cases that can't be solved by conventional means. Other spirits who died protecting innocence and refuse to rest until justice is served. And tomorrow when the phone rings with another impossible case in another impossible place, I'll answer it. Because some responsibilities follow you forever, even into death. Especially into death.